Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January 2024 meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm the president of Civic Fed. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to take care of some Federation business, and then we're going to turn the program over to our county executive, who is going to share with us some of his experiences as county executive and talk about his priorities for FY24. So the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. You can find the agenda on page 2 of the January newsletter. Entertain a motion to accept the agenda, approve the agenda. Jerry,
I make a motion to accept the agenda.
It's been first. Is there a second?
I second.
It's been first and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Next order of business is to approve the minutes of the December 11th meeting. You will find those on page 12 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the December general meeting?
Motion to approve.
It's been first. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you very much. The next order of business is the treasurer's report, and we'll hear from our treasurer, Jerry Garson.
We operate on a fiscal year beginning July 1st. So far, our dues collections have been $1,570. We've had in the last month $105 of website expense, giving us so far a net income for $287 for the period, and our bank balance is $7,894. If there are any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Jerry. Any questions? Seeing none, let's proceed. Next order of business is the announcements. Does anybody have any announcements for delegates and our guests on the call? Anybody like to share any upcoming events? Peggy?
Yeah, I'd just say I'm looking very much forward to tomorrow afternoon's meeting with Chris Conklin, the director of DOT. We're going to try to get our tree vine campaign off the ground. So, yay!
Thank you, Peggy. Anybody else have any other announcements? Well, not seeing anybody raising their hand or waving frantically. Let's get into the program for the evening. It's our pleasure to welcome Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich to the Civic Federation meeting this evening. I've written a little profile of the county executive in the newsletter. Many of you know him well. He's been a friend of neighborhoods. He's been a friend of our community. He's been a friend of the Civic Federation for many years. I've included in this January newsletter list of our priorities, Civic Federation priorities, and many of you will have noticed that our priorities are very similar to the county executive's priorities for Montgomery County government. So we're anxious to hear from him this evening. So I'll turn it over to County Executive Elrich, and please, County Executive, talk as long as you want, and then please make yourself available for some questions from our delegates and our friends.
So I just want to talk kind of broadly about where the county sits right now, so you get an idea of what we're dealing with, and then also about some of the legislative changes we're hoping we can get out of Annapolis. So first of all, Alan, thank you and the Federation for having me here and giving me a chance to give you an update on the county. You are getting an early preview. Next week, we'll be releasing the capital budget, and we're working on the operating budget now. I started having meetings today on operating. So things are moving forward. The county is in, I'd say, pretty good shape in terms of our physical state. We saw an increase so far in both property tax revenues and income tax revenues. And to date anyway, the increase in those has been larger than the decrease in transfer and recordation taxes. So we're on track for another, I'd say, plus year in terms of revenues. Our reserves, which if those of you who remember, the county was targeted, always been trying to get to 10%. We were always dinged by the rating agencies for when are you guys going to get to 10%? Well, we ended the year at 14. We're about 17 right now. We have about a $400 million plus surplus as we continue to bring in revenues that exceed our expenditures and exceed our budget expectations. So this is good news. And we anticipate that this enables us, for example, to plug the reduction in recordation and transfer taxes, and we will use reserves to plug that hole so that it doesn't have a budget impact. We've been, talking about the school budget, the operating budget. We think we can handle most of their requests. We're not anticipating having to do a general property tax increase this year. So we think that things will work out within the revenues that we have available. And I'm pretty optimistic about that. We've made a fair amount of progress on things. We've got funding for bus rapid transit increasingly in this budget. We're beginning to fund some of the climate change things that we'll talk a little bit more about later, but they're a big deal. So there's a lot of, I think, good stuff coming forward. And I think people will be generally happy about where we go right now. There are some things that we're, hoping we can get through. One is the Office of People's Counsel. I would be thrilled if the state would mandate that the county council has to fund this office. We continue to try to fund it. If the state doesn't act, we'll put it back in our request to fund the office. I think it's ridiculous that they refuse to provide this kind of service to our residents. They're very happy to hand out tax giveaways to the development community, but to give residents the kind of legal advice and guidance that they could use when they're dealing with, zoning issues, they don't go in and defend residents. They're not there, as participants on the resident side in the hearing, but they give a lot of support and information to people. It's just a shame that council doesn't understand the importance of funding this. And, it puts people in a situation where you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back. I remember, because I was pretty active in this stuff, both before I got on the council and then as a council member. One of the big things that I remember Marty would say was that you could not get a traffic consultant, for example, to do a traffic study for a citizens group because they knew they would not get hired by a developer again if they did work for citizen groups. This is the kind of thing that puts residents at a real disadvantage. So we need to figure out how to try to level the playing field, give people the tools they need to participate in these conversations in a meaningful way. So look for our support on this. It's important to me personally because I know what it can do. And, hopefully it's important. I know it's important to all of you guys. On the topic of job creation and economic development, I think you saw much ado about the comptroller's report about the state of Maryland. They pegged the state of Maryland slowdown to about 2017. I actually think it's earlier than that. Montgomery County, we had a report done for us. It was the Reach report, and the Reach report puts the slowdown closer to 2010 at the time of the recession. Montgomery County never fully came out of the recession. Took years, and in some cases still not true today, were to fully restore all the cuts that were made in the recession. Revenues were, relatively slow to increase. We haven't seen a lot of growth, for a long time in the private sector. And so we know this has been an ongoing problem. When I got elected, one of the first things I tried to do is jumpstart the White Flint development, and actually met with a big developer who was doing a project in Baltimore, actually got him to come down and make a proposal to the learner company to either partner with them or buy them out of their project. And he had proposed a very large, I think it was a 4.2 million square foot development, really substantial, a little bit smaller than what was in the master plan, but very substantial. The learners wound up not taking it, but it kind of highlighted for me that there's absolutely an interest in people coming here and doing things. I turned my focus to, what are Montgomery County's strengths? And we have, one true strength that we can play on. The federal government doesn't count because we don't control it. But there was the life sciences industry, and Montgomery County's life sciences industry at the time was like number 4 in the country. We're now number 3 in the country. We have the second highest concentration of PhDs and, folks with advanced degrees in the country. So we're a major epicenter for this. But a lot of people don't even know about Montgomery County. If you go to international conferences and you say, we're representing the life sciences industry in Montgomery County or the life sciences industry in Shady Grove, it's like lost in the vapor. So, the expression would be we punch way below our weight. And so we started looking at what the opportunities were. And one of the things I focused on was trying to get graduate level research into the county. We've never had a relationship with Maryland where we had any of the graduate programs here that did research. We've got graduate programs at USG, but you don't have a department at USG. You don't have, resident professors at USG. And we wanted an actual program from the school in Montgomery County. And it took, because COVID had something to do with this, but it took almost 3 years to get an agreement with them and with WMATA. With them, it's the opening of an Institute for Health Computing that's going to focus on using artificial intelligence in the development of medicines and medical research in general. And with WMATA, it was getting an agreement to do a joint development project around the WMATA station that would focus the development of that station around life sciences. And about the same time, I started talking to the developers up there about what we were hoping to do. So what you'll see today is we've got a 500,000 square foot life sciences development coming on next door to the aquatic center up there. Every developer on the west side of 355 has refocused their projects on life sciences because we know we can bring life sciences there. My goal is to basically be able to replicate what Amazon was going to do over 10 or 12 years, which was about 11 million square feet of development. We absolutely believe, and we're zoned for, that we can do that much development on that side and that location of the county around the metro. The Institute for Health Computing right now is going into space on Executive Boulevard, about 30,000 square feet. But they're looking for a building or a large part of the building actually on top of the metro at North Bethesda, and WMATA is interested in that as well. Maryland has brought in economic development people to work them and attract companies that want to be located next to them. They're very optimistic about being able to bring companies here. So we're excited about that. At the same time, we're taking a broader look at our life sciences industry. I've been to a number of conferences. I traveled I've been to Taiwan, India, and Vietnam, talking to companies there about locating into the United States and specifically into Montgomery County. And, we've been working hard to market this space in the life sciences arena. And we think that we're getting bites there, but we're also getting bites on tech, IT tech in particular. So we're seeing an interest, and we're trying to encourage that interest and make sure we have the tools in place to ensure that we can bring the development here. And this is the last trip. The 3 trips we've taken have been led by us, actually our own economic development people, and Judy, who works in our office, has been really the champion and leader and getting these projects up off the ground and arranging all these meetings, and kept us very, very busy this last time in India and Vietnam, but we think it was well worth the time. We also brought over 20 companies with us from Montgomery County who were looking for opportunities to expand overseas. And it helped us in our pitch to these companies that we could, to these countries, that we weren't just saying we want to bring companies here, but we were bringing companies that were interested in expanding and developing in their countries as well. So we were able to, I think, make a good case for joint development. We are opening there'll be a new incubator in Montgomery County. We're doing this as a joint project with the Henry Jackson Foundation. It'll be our first co-branded incubator. And we're working with the Maryland Tech Council to bring in a training facility for manufacturing in the life sciences. And we'll be making investments in that as well. And we're in general trying to set the stage for more investment in Montgomery County, and particularly in life sciences. We've also gotten an interest from people in light manufacturing and some very high-tech manufacturing. So we've been in discussions with a number of companies around coming here from Taiwan and doing some of the things they're going to be required to do in the United States in the not too distant future if they want to continue to sell in the United States. So we're excited about where we're going to go with all this. And I think that's good news for us because we're not only doing life sciences, but we're diversifying where we're going to try
Want
to
hot
go.
sauce? Yeah. No wonder you can't do your work. You can't see.
Hello.
We'd like you to, everybody to mute their devices.
So we're we know what our strengths are. We're trying to build on them. We know where we've got opportunities for expansion, and we're building on those as well. We're doing an assessment of what does Montgomery County not have that Boston and San Francisco have in terms of assets that the life science community is looking for. And our goal is, when we get this assessment done, to actually add those pieces to the puzzle in Montgomery County. I'm not averse to investing in economic development. The fact is, we will not grow if we're not willing to invest. And I would tell you that, the biggest impediment to development in Montgomery County has been the refusal to invest in transit by both the state and by the county for years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's something that we're putting a lot of attention on. In the environment and climate change, I'm very excited about where we're going in this area. We have all the departments are working on actual plans, implementation plans. Our budgets have money and will have more money to help people make transitions, both money for individuals and money for commercial property to help transition to a greener environment. We're looking forward to working with the state's requirements, and if the state enacts their blueprint, it actually makes it easier for Montgomery County to make the changes. If our time frame, for example, the governor's time frame for greening the grid is 2035, if they do that, it actually helps Montgomery County because we would have to generate less clean energy here if the grid is green. And so if we're not trying to do this by ourselves, but we're able to do it with the state, then this enables us to put some of the investments we might have made in green generation. We can put these into helping people replace natural gas, heaters and ranges and things like that with electric heaters and ranges. So we have a symbiotic relationship, I think, with the state, and I think it's going to be pretty strong. We've got major issues with climate change. We're seeing it, and one of the big impacts is on streams. We brought in the hydrologist, and now we have a group that's actually doing a study of the watersheds in Montgomery County and what we're going to have to do to prevent flooding. The current sewer infrastructure that exists, the stormwater infrastructure, is not adequate to handle the storms that exist today. And, many of you have seen more flooding than we've ever seen in Montgomery County before. We're likely to see, apparently, some more flooding tomorrow. This is becoming normal, and we're looking at what we have to do. An example of the kind of things we're probably going to have to do is something Arlington's doing, where they've actually put a large underground massive cistern under an athletic field in Arlington. This is not a small project, but they have to divert the water and get as much of it in there because the pipes going into the streams can't handle it. And frankly, our streams can't handle the volume of water being discharged and the speed at which it's being discharged without seeing our streams further damaged. So that's one of the most immediate things that we're seeing. We've seen increases in heat. We've seen increases in pollution. We're getting hit by pollution that's not even our fault, like the Canadian fires that we got to experience last year. So all this stuff is coming at us, and we don't control everything, but we're going to do our best to control the things that we do control. And I am again optimistic about it. John Monger is just amazing, and Sarah is the new climate person, is also equally amazing. We have real visionary people and real doers who are in positions to actually do things now. So this is kind of fun to be working in that environment. On affordable housing, we've made record investments in affordable housing. We did one project alone that was $65 million, and we did it, and then we were able to get Enterprise to buy it from us after we actually took the property off the market. We're looking to do more of that. We've got record amounts of money in the Affordable Housing Fund, and shortly I'll be announcing that we're going to add $50 million out of our surplus into the Affordable Housing Fund and add another 50 million when we introduce the operating budget, because we think we've got the money to actually put in there. And it's critical because we already have commitments that'll eat up all the money that we thought was going to be in the budget next year for affordable housing projects. So we're doing a combination of building and a combination of buying existing properties and working with nonprofits to buy them from us. We're not holding the properties, but we're able to bridge purchases from us to nonprofits that want to hold the properties long term is affordable. And some of this stuff is really fun. I know some of you know one of the things we were really concerned with was years ago when the Falklands got sold to a developer who was going to knock all that down and put in, high rises and displace all this affordable housing. And we are now partnering with a nonprofit developer who is going to redevelop the property, but redevelop in a way that doesn't displace people and actually adds more affordable housing to the project. We're working with a developer in Pike and Rose who's going to do 1,000-unit housing development, and they're going to put half that development, 500 units, into affordability. We're looking to increase the range of affordability because right now we mostly just serve people who earn between 60 and 70% of area median income, which roughly translates to, maybe 65, 68 to 75, $80,000 in income. We know that we've got a lot of households, 50,000 households with incomes under $50,000 who don't qualify for our programs. And in places like Bethesda and elsewhere, the new housing being built, if it's not an MPDU, if you make $85,000 and you're a young person, you can't afford even the market rate housing. Market rate housing starts at levels that aren't affordable to most normal human beings. And that's a real problem. So we want to expand the range of affordability in the MPDU program and rename it as, Housing for All program, and ensure that we're providing housing down to lower levels, but also expanding housing availability to higher levels, and to increase the amounts from 12.5% to 15%, up to 30% requirements in this broader range of housing. We heard a lot about, and you've all heard about, all the people who are projected to come here, and it seems to be lost on the planning board and other people. That when you tell us that 40,000 households are coming here and that 3/4 of them are going to be below $75,000 in income, and of those, which is 30,000 people, 20,000 people are going to be 50,000 or lower, and your housing policies only provide housing for people earning more than $60,000, you've got a major problem. And nobody seems willing to address that. They just talk about, yeah, we're going to do more affordable housing. Thrive will be wonderful. Not so much. Most of our development is going to come from larger developments Thrive is never going to be a major developer in the county, nor should it be. And most of this, if we don't get the affordable housing out of the larger developments we're doing, we're never going to get the affordable housing. So I'm really concerned about that. And I continue to have the same serious misgivings about Thrive. I'm going to be blunt about this. If you take a single family lot and you turn it into 3 houses, and you're in a neighborhood where the average price of a house is $800,000, you're going to get 3 $800,000 townhouses. And if you talk to any real estate agent, that's exactly what they'll tell you is going to happen. When the council produced the legislation, which they fortunately have not yet introduced, about attainable housing, it's worth noting when they said they were going to allow small apartment buildings in neighborhoods up to 15 units. The magic thing about 15 is there's no MPDU requirement if you're building 15 units. MPDUs don't kick in to 20 units. I'm pretty sure the council members introduced that legislation and the planning board that supported it knows damn well that there were no MPDU requirements if that was the housing you were building. So we've got a real problem, and the transition in neighborhoods could lead to basically nothing more than expensive housing, and not make a dent. And one of the problems is it takes that housing out of the master planned areas where the housing was accounted for. And all this talk about who's coming here is all predicated on the projections about how much of the zoned capacity of Montgomery County was going to be built. And so they would do these projections, and they do them for 5-year intervals on a 30-year horizon. And all those numbers are based on what percentage of the zoned environment today is going to be built over these 5-year intervals over 30 years. So all this scare about who's coming here is actually what exactly would happen if it was built, the county was built out the way our master plan suggests the county be built out. So I've argued and continue to argue that, they've been busy creating a false narrative that, oh my God, all these people are coming here, and if you don't rezone the county, there's no place for people to be. Actually, if you keep the zoning that's in place in the county today, it will hold the projected future growth of the county. And that's where those numbers come from. So we all need to remember that and, be aware of, what's going to go on. And in Tacoma Park, they're doing a minor master plan for Tacoma Park. And this gives you their idea of minor. They're going to increase the number of housing units in Tacoma Park by over about a third. That's not a minor master plan. And the population would increase by a projected close to 40%. And this is all on one block where the hospital is, and on about 4 blocks on Maple Avenue. And on Maple Avenue, where the city has all this affordable housing, they've rezoned the entire block for 150-foot tall buildings. And in Tacoma Park, if these buildings were built, there would be no rent stabilization for 6 years. The MPD requirement would be 12.5%. And so you can kind of guess what that outcome is. But at the neighborhood level, and you all should appreciate this, and if you live in a single family neighborhood, in the neighborhood where they're doing this, there are 2 blocks, 2 residential blocks, 1 block long. One block has 3 apartment buildings in it. They're 3-unit apartment buildings. Park and Planning proposes to rezone them in the name of Thrive to build 50-foot tall apartment buildings. And on the other side of the block, the other street, there are 2 units with 8 apartments in each, and they're proposing to rezone those. So here you've got a neighborhood that is 80% rental, where apartments are already mixed into the built environment. And Park and Planning's response is not that this is the perfect Thrive neighborhood, but that we need to add more apartments and taller apartments, which will not look at all like what's in the neighborhood. But we need to do this in the name of Thrive. And I will make sure I share this information with you all so you can see it with your own eyes. But it ought to scare the hell out of anybody else who's dealing with a rezoning with Thrive. Because if this is what they're going to do in Tacoma Park, where in a neighborhood where apartments are the dominant form of housing, you can imagine what this is going to mean in other areas. So people ought to be concerned about this. What else can I tell you? Other exciting news. AstraZeneca announced a major expansion in Montgomery County, and we're really excited about that. In the East County, there are 3 new shopping centers, and we finally have an agreement on how to redevelop the long sought after Viva White Oak property. David Bramble's company is going to, I guess, be the major partner in this project. And we're already talking to them about development there. He's got an idea, the concept of both commercial, job-related development as well as housing. So I'm actually excited about it. It's the first time I've been excited about a project over there. The Burtonsville Shopping Center is beginning to open. I'm going to go to the groundbreaking. I'm going to go to the opening of the grocery store up in Burtonsville. The White Oak Town Center project is underway and moving toward completion. And the project at the Gateway at New Hampshire Avenue and the Beltway is underway. So all the projects that were stuck on the East County are unstuck, and the East County is going to get a new Montgomery College campus, and it is possible, they haven't signed anything yet, but Montgomery College and David Bramble have been talking about locating the college on the site of the 300 acres that'll be redeveloped, which would be, I think, pretty cool, because it would get us a development of a college that's actually built into a brand new environment. And so building an environment around the college would be very interesting. And on a housing detail over the past 4 years, and remember 2 of those were COVID, we produced over 1,300 affordable units, and we preserved another 1,850 affordable units. So, we've been making good progress on this stuff. What else can I tell you? We've got a bus electrification plan. We've got our first on-site green hydrogen production station on the way, being built primarily with federal money. We put a ban on gas-powered leaf blowers, and the county's Tree Montgomery hit a milestone of 11,000 trees planted. And we built the largest rooftop solar project for affordable multi-family housing in county history. On police front, we gave bonuses to police officers, 20,000. Hopefully we'll see that in our recruitment efforts this time. We launched our first drone as a first responder pilot. We're already getting good reports on the pilot, so I would expect that pilot will be expanded around the county. We gave out $300,000 for nonprofit security grants because of the mess in the Middle East and the blowback that we're experiencing over here. And we've worked with WSSC on mandating clear marking of gas pipes to prevent tragic accidents like the one that happened in Silver Spring not so long ago. We're working with Governor Moore pretty closely. He's have a pretty good relationship with him. He actually put money in for Maryland's part of taking care of the WMATA issue for the time being. And we need the district, and we need Virginia to step up. He's been clear, he's basically acknowledged we have no money in the transportation fund. It's a real problem. It's been something that's been kind of kicked around for a long time. I'll talk about that in a second, but we need a solution to building transit in this county. And I'll say, the biggest problem we have is we've been stuck for over a decade, and everybody points to Virginia and is, what about Virginia? What about jobs? What about their growth? And people need to go back to around the 2008 to 2012 time period in Northern Virginia, when Tyson's Corner was a miserable shopping center, and none of the kind of office development you see today, nothing like today was there. And they made a decision to change their tax structure. A big deal they made to change their tax structure. And they implemented a series of taxes that the developers went to the state legislature along with the council from Fairfax, asking the state legislature to give the local counties the authority to tax commercial property for transportation projects. The money is targeted in transportation, can't go to the general fund, can't be used for feeding people, building schools, or anything, has to be used for transportation. So Fairfax County is in a way different position than Montgomery County is. And I want to bring up this slide and see if I can share my screen here. So let me get into this. I'm going to go here, share. You can tell how often I do this. Share screen. I want to share this screen. You guys see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Dale Barnhart has a question. Please keep
No.
me in mind.
Yeah, all in due time.
We're going to save the questions to the end. If people have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll also recognize people by
Oh.
raising their hand. So let's hold off to questions until the county executive has finished his discussion.
So this is Fairfax County, Virginia, and these are their tax rates. And you can see that last year they are at $1.09.5, and we're at about $1.04.5. We were at 99 cents before that. I should have had the DC chart up here, but I'll give you a shorthand. Is DC does a study every 2 years on residential and commercial property. I think commercials every year, residential's every 2 years. Montgomery, not just property, but just tax burden. The lowest jurisdiction on residential tax burden is the District of Columbia. The second lowest is Montgomery County. All the other jurisdictions are higher. And why DC is lower than us is because their residential property tax rate is only 85 cents. Their commercial property tax rate is $1.89. That's how they manage a lower tax rate. Fairfax County's rate is $1.09.5. Their personal property rate is 4.57 cents. This is all commercial. We call it personal property, but it's all business property. That is twice Montgomery County's personal property tax rate, twice. If you're in McLean, they built a community center. Residents are paying 2.3 cents on the tax rate. In the Reston Community Center, they're paying 4.7 cents on the tax rate to pay for it. Here's the fun stuff. I'll leave out the stormwater. We're going to go to the big ones. If you're in Tyson's Corner, there are 3 taxing districts that apply to you. Dulles Phase 1, Dulles Phase 2, and the Tyson Service District. If you add those up, that is 32 cents on top of the base rate of $1.09. That puts you at $1.41, right? Then there's this little 12.5-cent tax here, commercial real estate for transportation. This is levied on every square inch of commercial property in Fairfax County. So when you add all these things up together, you are north of $1.50 for total taxes on commercial property in Tyson's Corner. Montgomery County, nowhere near that. We have none of these taxes. So when you look at Virginia and you wonder, gosh, how did they build all that stuff? You build that stuff because you've got a tax base that the commercial sector pays into that allows you to develop their areas in a way that makes them more attractive. So they put in the Silver Line. Every jurisdiction is working on bus rapid transit. Every jurisdiction's made major improvements to transportation. These taxes in varying degrees apply to the other Northern Virginia counties. 12.5 cent, I believe, applies to everybody over there. We have nothing like it. If Montgomery County had a 12.5 cent tax on our commercial property tax base, it would be worth about $52 million in annual revenues to Montgomery County. So imagine if we had had that for the last decade and applied that to pay for bonds to build the transportation projects that we should have been building. And if we had the equivalent of Tyson's taxes, that's well, a year ago, it was 50 cents more than what we were taxing at. That's a lot of revenue that they're raising that they're able to pay for infrastructure with, and Montgomery can't do it. But the worst thing about our mess is that the state of Maryland, if when the governor pulled the plug on the transportation budget, everybody realized that not a single county in the state could build any of the transportation projects because none of them have taxing authority and none of them have the ability to separate commercial from residential real estate. So if you want to tax for a project, you have to hit the residents at the same time you're hitting commercial property. You raise, in Montgomery County, the ratio is you'd raise more than $2 for every dollar you raise for commercial property. And all of us know we're never going to be able to do that here. This is not like schools. If you're saying you're going to tax for development and you're going to land these taxes on residents, that's simply not going to happen here. That's why in Fairfax County, they separated the rates. So the taxes are different for commercial property than residential. And they have the authority to tax and create these special taxing districts. So there are special taxing districts in Tyson's and Potomac Yards. In the Route 28 corridor, I didn't mention that, but here's another special taxing district. There you would take the 16 cents and the 12.5 cents and add the 28.5 cents to the $1.09, and you wind up with the $1.38, I guess, in terms of a tax rate if you're developing in the entire Route 28 corridor. Montgomery County has none of that. So when a developer tells you that Montgomery County is the high taxed area, it's simply not true. Montgomery County, in fact, in DC's study on commercial property, Montgomery County is the lowest tax jurisdiction in the entire DC region, the lowest tax jurisdiction. So you got to ask yourself, if you're the lowest tax jurisdiction, why aren't you able to attract development here? It's not taxes that are scaring people off. And for whatever issues there are with our approval processes, people will tell you that Fairfax County is no picnic and DC is certainly not a party. The big difference is they can build infrastructure. And as one of the supervisors said to me, if a developer is looking at Fairfax County and they want to know you've got this road or you got this transportation in the master plan, when is it going to be built? They can look them in the eye and they can say it's going to be built on schedule. We've got a taxing district that's going to provide the funds for this project. We will build the project. If you ask us in Montgomery County, I don't know when the purple line is going to be built, good luck. And if you ask me when BRT is going to be built, this thing has been in the master plan for 10 years. We have never been able to raise the money out of our capital budget in order to pay for it. So we pay for getting a little bit in little tiny investments and dribs and drabs over the past decade. It is so bad that at one point we were splitting 3 years of planning money that could have been spent in 1 year and could have done the design in 1 year. We split it over 3 years because you didn't have enough room in the capital budget to fit it in. So these are the kind of things that are problems for Montgomery County that, have really handicapped us. So while Virginia's been able to build infrastructure, well, they can guarantee developers certainty that infrastructure will be built, we don't have any ability to tell people that. And that is a major inhibitor toward Montgomery County doing the development we need to do. This is an example, it puts the District of Columbia, Fairfax, and Montgomery, Bethesda urban tax, whatever. You see in DC, they start at an 85% rate and they go up to $1.89 on commercial property, and residential is 85. In Fairfax County, with all the taxes in, it's $1.17. You add another 32 cents, you're at $1.50 in Fairfax County. Residential stays at $1.17. And in Montgomery County, residential is $1.16 with the state tax, and commercial is $1.16 with the state tax. So you can see the big difference in revenues that we raise and everybody else around us raises. It's a problem. So we're asking the state, as are the other county executives, because when I said everybody realized this, there was a moment when the governor pulled the plug and everybody's like, we're all dead in the water. We're not going to get money for the rest of the BRT. There's no money for the Charles County Southern Transit line. There's no money for the Red Line. Even in the small rural counties, there's no money for projects that don't have a shovel in the ground already. There's no money for those projects. And most jurisdictions want the ability to do what Virginia does, which is levy taxes. And most jurisdictions want to be able to separate the taxes from commercial and residential so they don't have to tax residents. And that's my goal, is to come away from this legislative session with the ability to separate our tax rates and to put taxes in place that would let us build the infrastructure. In case you're wondering how we decide the tax rates, we would look at the capital projects we were going to build. We would find out what the bond repayment would be over 30 years. We'd factor in what we're going to put in out of our own operating budget and what we're going to get from the federal government for transportation money and what we get from the state. And we would bond the delta. And so we would not be bonding the entirety of everything we're doing, but we'd be bonding a good portion of it. And it's a way we can keep this load off of taxpayers. We would take things like Observation Drive, would wind up in this district. We would take the north entrance to the metro. We'd take the rest of the tunnel work in Bethesda. We'd be able to put it in there. And this is the added benefit that comes from creating the special taxing district. If we take the transportation projects out of our capital budget today, you've already given us the money. We would be able to build more schools rather than have to tell the schools there's no way their budget fits in a 6-year budget. It doesn't, trust me. And we'd be able to accelerate libraries. We'd be able to accelerate some of the things that we've been forced to delay. And we tell people, we'll get to it and we can get to it. You know, the Clarksburg Library has been waiting how many years to get a library? It's finally in the budget now. So we would be able to accelerate some of those things and we would not have to touch the tax rate to do it. So you at the residential end would see more benefit, not just from the transportation, but from our ability to build the kind of projects that you'd like us to build. And it would massively help us on transportation. It would help us address the primary reason why we lose to Virginia, because our transportation sucks compared to Virginia's transportation. And I think it would really help us advance economic development. So, you know, my approach to things was, if somebody's eating your lunch, you look at how you got their lunch. It's really clear how Virginia got the edge on us in terms of development. And we continue to focus on, oh my God, we can't touch the tax rate. Well, that's great, because people know that as long as it's tied to residents, we really can't touch the tax rate. The people who are the most vocal about this don't want to do a commercial tax. I can promise you there's no way we will build this stuff if we're not able to raise additional money. And if the state is at zero, I guarantee you they're not going back to 3.5 million. That means we would face even more delays if we're waiting for the state to fund our projects. So I will end on that cheery note, but I think it's the most important thing. It's an opportunity for us not only to not increase the tax burden on residents, but to actually improve your quality of life, both in transportation and in the delivery of other projects that we want to help with. So I will stop there.
Well, thank you, County Executive, for that presentation. We've got a couple of people who have raised their hands, asked questions, and there's some questions in the chat. And Jackie, if you're there, you can help us with the questions in the chat. It's not my preference, but we'll start with some of our executive committee members who are raising their hand, and we'll go with Jerry Garson.
Why can't Maryland change its real estate tax structure to like most of New York State, which has 4 categories: 1 to 3 family houses, apartment houses, commercial property, and utility property?
They can do anything they want to do. They just don't do it. They hide behind, you know, there's a real reluctance on people to tax the commercial sector. And so they hide behind the residents and tie you to these tax rates so that it becomes a dead issue for local jurisdictions. It's interesting, all the municipalities have the right to separate their tax rates. But but when the state passed that law, they didn't extend it to counties. We're asking for the same ability. And if we do that, we can talk about what categories. That's going to be a very live discussion in Annapolis this year. And if you guys were to weigh in supporting this, this is a big deal. Because somebody's going to pay for this or we're not going to do it. I don't want to not do it, but I'm trying to come up with a system like Virginia's that doesn't put all the burden on residents.
Thank you, Cherry. Peggy Dennis.
Yes, good evening, Mark. Reading through the budget priorities in our newsletter, I saw information about the American Legion Bridge. I think we all agree that that must be rebuilt.
Right.
But another phrase jumped out at me, which was, quote, modernize I-270, unquote. Exactly what does that entail, and how, if at all, is it an improvement over Governor Hogan's original proposal?
So Governor Hogan's original proposal included massive flyovers and integration lanes that blew the road completely out of the fence. I mean, it would have gone beyond the walls of what's there today. You could not fit what he planned inside the walls. And during his time, I worked a lot with Greg Slater, who was the transportation secretary, but had his own ideas about things. But I mean, he serves the governor and he does what the governor wants. What we're looking at doing involves absolutely none of that. For example, from Frederick, where Route 70 hits I-270 in Frederick, for much of the length of that road, there's an inside service lane that could be converted to a through lane, which the state actually did at the southern part of I-270, where it comes off the spur, even when Hogan was there. And the impact of that would be pretty substantial. On the upper part of 270, where there are 2 lanes, if you go from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, you get a 1/3 reduction in the traffic in all lanes. Because you take a third off one and you take a third off the other. They function at 2/3 capacity. The third lane picks up a third of the traffic from each lane, so it's 2/3 capacity. When you get down to 3 lanes, when you enter Montgomery County, you add another lane. You reduce each lane by 1/4. The governor did not want to do this. I suggested doing this. Actually, when I was first elected, I wrote the state and I said, why don't you paint in the lanes and fill in the places where you actually need to fill in? Do that now and see what the impact is on traffic. And why the reason they didn't want to do it, because if they had gotten the benefit out of it, there would have been no need to do what the governor wanted to do. So this is something that could be done. The other possibility, if you take out the bridges and replace them with clear spans, you pick up enough room that you could, and you take out the separation between through and local and that big island and the service lanes on both sides of the island. You pick up enough room that you could basically add 2 lanes in each direction to 270 and not go outside the boundaries. The state has other options. In places where it gets too narrow, you don't need a service lane. And it occurred to me as I was driving on the Beltway, there are places in the Beltway where there's no service lane because it's too close to the hospital. It's too close to, a geological feature like a creek where, the bridge is not going to be widened for 1 lane. The service lanes go away. So you could take your most constrained points, bag the service lane there, and leave the service lane in for most of the road where there's room for it, but take it out where there's no room for it. So they've got a myriad of things they could do that they haven't thought about doing. So I've been pushing this and, I got a sense of what was in other people's proposals. Some of it, were things that were much less intrusive and, ironically probably would have cost less than the one the governor picked. But I don't know because we don't get to see any of the money on that. But I think there's a way to handle, adding capacity. But the easiest thing to do, and I've made this suggestion again, is ask the state to start by adding a lane right now, everywhere they can, paving the places that don't exist. And before anybody says, well, what about the Monocacy River? There are 2 through lanes over the Monocacy River. There are 2 concrete lanes. There's an inside shoulder and outside shoulder that are the width of a car that go over the Monocacy. So if you took out the inside shoulder, you get that 3rd lane even over the Monocacy without having to worry about the battlefield crap and all the other stuff, because you're not going to go there. So this is a solvable problem if people are willing to solve it. And if you're not looking to see how many campaign contributions you can get from somebody who's going to get the largest P3 project in the world.
Thank you. There's some questions in the chat. People, don't be shy. Put your questions in the chat, or if you prefer, you can use the raise hand function, which is located underneath the reactions icon. Mark, Karen Matson
I'm on the
asks,
phone. How do I
please mute your. Well, who's speaking on the phone, and who is that?
I muted her, sorry.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we
Let me go down the line. I see Karen's questions. We don't do a report card. I mean, I don't even know what we'd have to do a report card on serving residents, because this is purely subjective. What we do is we do a survey of our residents, and they tell us what they think. And I guarantee you, it's not 100% everything is perfect. So the survey gives us, input on, what we do well. It gives us input on what we don't do so well. We actually publish the survey when the survey comes out so people can see the results. And we look at what we can do to improve ourselves. But the survey is the most effective thing. Departments also do following up with residents and how did we serve you? And we get a better sense of how we do. When we do this, I've asked the departments to look at implementing something called customer-centered design. I got inspired by this because I knew somebody who worked with a nonprofit that worked with the VA hospital. And I think everybody remembers that the VA was like raked over the coals for possibly the worst hospital system in the universe. And they were just rated as one of the highest rated hospital systems in the country. So how did they go from the worst to the best? They did it by implementing customer focused design. And what they did is they asked customers, what do you encounter as you go through the process? What is your experience when you go to this office or when you try to get this permit? And then they took the customer responses and went back and fixed the issues that were in the departments. And so if there was a process that we thought was fine, the customers found opaque or obtuse or way too cumbersome, they were able to go back and make changes that made them more customer friendly and improved customer satisfaction. So that's something I've asked people to look at here is in implementation. Karen also asked about what's the read on 311. 311 is getting better. We're beginning to implement as much artificial intelligence as we can. To be perfectly honest, there is no way that a call taker has this encyclopedic knowledge of every department and everything that happens in the county. And being able to have AI as a backup, so we're training artificial intelligence in a closed environment so it doesn't go wild on everything the county does, we will be able to get better answers to people much quicker, because it doesn't take but a fraction of a second to do this. And hopefully it'll improve our 311 response. You'll get more comprehensive answers and probably more information. And to give you an idea of, the best story I heard about AI was one of the bots gave an assignment to AI. It said, here's a scientific paper written in 2020. We want you to update the paper for all the papers that are written between 2020 and 2023, and we want you to update the graph. While they went to lunch, the bot found 250 incidents of the word they were looking for being mentioned. they found 250 incidents where the research was relevant to the research that was done in the paper. And they updated the paper and updated the graphs by the time people got back from lunch. I guarantee you, I do not have any capability of searching 200,000 papers, with individuals. You would never get this done. And that's just a glimpse of what can be done with AI if it's not in the hands of lunatics. So my goal is to keep it out of the hands of lunatics.
Just a quick follow-up question, Mark. When
Yeah.
was the last survey? And is that something that you do on an annual or what? How?
It's either annual or biannual.
Okay,
The last one was, these years are a blur to me, I will confess. So I either saw it last summer or it was the summer before, but they're regular surveys we do.
and it's on the county website.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. And we're
Anybody
going
wants to know about, do you want me to just go through these, Alan?
to, sure.
I'll do another one and then you can do one off the,
Okay,
who's
perfect.
called. Okay,
Perfect.
so natural gas flow, we don't know how much is lost. We don't have the capability of tracking every line. Our goal is to get rid of natural gas. That's
How,
that's the only way you're going to solve this problem, because it's going to continue to leak no matter what we do. It leaks from the wellhead all the way to the point of delivery. And the only solution is not to have it. So we're working on that. Hopefully the states may introduce legislation that basically requires a switch over from natural gas to electric. We're providing some funds, both for the private sector and for individuals, to make a conversion from natural gas. It may not all be that expensive, not requiring people to shut down their stuff tomorrow. So, equipment's going to reach the end of its life. And when it reaches the end of its life, or 2035, whenever, which of those two things comes first, probably, we'd require a transition. But we're not going to tell somebody who bought a gas furnace yesterday that you got to decommission your gas furnace and put in electric. It would be nice if you did. I've got stuff that's 5 years old. I'm going to probably replace it just because I might as well do it. And I know it's the right thing to do, and it'll give me a chance to experience what it actually is going to cost somebody to turn a stove into an electric stove and to change a hot water heater from a boiler to probably a heat pump, hot water. They actually make heat pumps that heat both hot water and then provide cool air. So I'm going to look at that. Ken Edison.
can you talk about the requirement for the sprinkler systems in these very large buildings, which really,
Hello,
we can't,
I'm trying to answer the questions in this chat here. So
well, how do I get them there?
Well, yeah, I think Alan
Joyce,
suggests you
Joyce will
write it
come
there.
back to you. Please
Just
put your
keep your hand
questions
up.
in
I'll
the
get
chat.
to you. Yeah, I'm going to get to you. Just relax. I'm not going anywhere. Can Edison High School teach culinary arts, facilitate skills for food service without gas? I'm sure we can do that. And that's just a matter of them updating their equipment to train people to use what'll be the new equipment sooner or later. But it's a good question, but it's certainly within the realm of what they can do. And is there an initiative for intergenerational co-housing or similar means for seniors to mentor young children as part of shared adult or child? So I'll say the
Gail Barnhart has a question.
Excuse me, people, we have a system here. Put your questions in the chat
It's not
or
fair.
raise
It
your
is fair.
hand. Please.
you just can't call out. There are lots of people with questions.
Sorry, she's
Well-
on the phone.
So intergenerational co-housing. I mean, that's a voluntary thing, and I'm not quite sure what people mean. I mean, I know the co-housing development in Silver Spring had young people and older people, and they had people with kids and people without kids. So I think it's possible naturally. I know that the Gaithersburg Rec Center, I want to say Bader Center. I know that it's the big rec center in Gaithersburg. They serve both young people and adults in there. And I really liked it because I actually saw adults and young people mixing with each other. I thought it was a really positive experience. Um, Shared adult and childcare comes down to whether the provider, which is usually not the county, is interested in providing shared care. But I'd have no objection if somebody wanted to do an adult center and have children in the same facility. They just have to meet the state requirements. So now you can go back to calling on people, Alan, and I'll go back.
Okay, the next person is Byron Block. And Byron, please, a
a
a
question.
short question and no follow-ups.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much for being here and for helping make our county so excellent. How clean is our water supply, including what do we do about removing microplastics and PFAS or forever chemicals from our water supply?
We've talked with WSSC about it. They are actually studying it. They know they have to get some things. I don't know if they're going to get everything out, but I know they're concerned about PFAS in particular and microplastics. So I know that they've actually told us that they are working on it and getting estimates for what it's going to cost to upgrade their facility to be able to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Byron. No follow-ups. Carrie Lamari.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Just lovely. How are you?
I'm good. Listen, the Office of Economic Development, I've never really been a fan of this new office. Of course, I wasn't a fan with Steve Silverman's office and the Peter Bang thing and all the rest of that.
None of us
But-
were fans of that.
But have we done any kind of review on the cost benefit analysis, and are they reaching out to like companies in Japan and Boston for AI and that sort of thing to bring them into Montgomery County?
So
Bring me up.
that's a good question. And they're going to come before the council and get grilled on this. I can tell you that like the 3 trips we took to Taiwan, India, and Vietnam were all created by us in my office. You know, when we revitalized economic development, we started with small business support, and we're continuing to expand our small business support because that was the casualty. When Ike got rid of everything and dumped it into the EDC, the county kind of dismantled all the local stuff it was doing. So we've put the local stuff back in, and we're pretty aggressive about doing this. And when we realized what we were dealing with on AI and on life sciences, we've taken the lead out of our office on these trips because we want to go mining. And I will be blunt, you know, the EDC didn't necessarily want to do what we did, and we're not going to stop doing it. And I know the council has a lot of questions that are similar to your questions. You should make sure that the council members hear from you about your questions about what they do and how they measure what they do.
Thank you for that question, Peggy Dennis. Peggy, you're muted.
Am I
There-
muted now?
No, you're fine.
Okay, quickie. On the greening of Montgomery County, what is the status and outlook for getting rid of the incinerator up at Dickerson?
Funny you should mention that. We are getting a report soon. You know, we brought in consultants. We stopped trying to do this ourselves. We brought in outside expertise. They're coming up with a plan, not only to get rid of the incinerator, but we've got to redo our entire trash facility, you know, because when we were burning stuff, we had no incentive to recycle and reuse. So I just, you know, it breaks my heart to think how negligent we were. And since I came in, I've been trying to figure out how to drive a stake through the heart of the incinerator. I did not get a lot of help, to be frank, from some of, you know, the people who work over there, who insisted that digesters didn't exist and various things that actually are in full swing don't exist. So I went, we have a new environmental director. He has fully embraced this. I actually was in San Francisco in October. I was supposed to be there for fun. I added 2 days to my glorious trip, and I went down to South Bay and to San Jose. And I went to, in the 2 days, I went to 5 or 6 different um, waste recycling plants. And I saw all the things I ever dreamed about being done there. And to people who think like, oh no, Montgomery County's different, nobody's going to do this. I saw tipping floors that looked like our tipping floor. I saw mountains of trash piled up. Those mountains of trash, the bags got ripped open. They were put on conveyor belts. The conveyor belts sorted the waste. And at the end of the journey, you had conveyor belts that were putting off pure cardboard. You had conveyor belts that were putting off bottles and cans and plastic separately. You had conveyor belts or bins that had collected paper, clean paper. You had bins that were collecting dirty paper. You had everything, and food. There were places that completely separated the food out of the mixed trash. And so they weren't burning anything, and they don't send things to the dump in the volume that we do. And so what I've focused on is identifying markets for our waste. And here's an example, like our bottles. We sell our bottles as whole bottles. Turns out that glass is, if added to concrete production, massively reduces the carbon footprint of concrete. But no one's going to put a glass bottle in concrete construction, making. So one of the things I want in the new facility is to crush the glass. And then the question is, do you crush it or powder it? If I crush it, it goes in as aggregate, it has one value. If I grind the glass to a powder, it actually goes in as silicone into the actual production of the concrete, and it has a much higher value. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking at is, how do you get the most value out of our plastic, out of everything we do? If I take my plastic right now, we put it on a pallet and send it to somebody. We hope they recycle it. They're supposed to. If I took that plastic and I shred it and I put it through a washer, it has a much higher value because I can separate it by, first you separate it by color, then you shred it, then you put it through a washer, and you sell glass shreds to companies that do recycled plastic, and you get a much higher value for it than you do for the plastic that comes on a pallet. If I take it a step further, and we're going to find if it's economically feasible, if I put a pelletizer at the end of this process, you take the shreds go into a pelletizer, and then you're selling pellets to the plastic industry directly that consumes the pellets to produce recycled plastic products. These are all things in a supply chain. And that's one of the things we're going to look for, is somebody to analyze supply chains for everything inside of our waste stream. At the incinerator site, the leaf mulch pile is going to get food added to it. We're likely going to, it's a good chance, we haven't decided yet fully. We're going to do an anaerobic digester and a aerobic digester. I would prefer to go all anaerobic because you still get compost that you can use for farms, but you capture all the gas, and I don't want to waste the energetics of food waste. There's a lot of energetics in food waste, and if we capture the natural gas, we can feed it directly to our buses. And this is the cool thing for farmers. I've been talking to them. If we built an anaerobic digester on somebody's farmland, and it doesn't have to be huge, we're talking about not a lot of acres to do this in. They all use natural gas in their dryers for their crops. And I've got the count on how many dryers there are and how much gas they use. And they all buy it from Suburban Propane. So this is all, dirty natural gas. If we capture all their food waste and we turn it into natural gas or methane or propane, whatever, they would use their own stuff and they would generate their own gas and they'd use it for the energy they need. No one's going to replace their dryers with electric dryers. It's just not efficient. So gas is the most efficient. And if you're going to do gas, if we produce our own gas, that's the best way to do it. And there's a possibility of hydrogen production out of food waste. They're doing this at a non-commercial level right now. But if they get to the point where they're doing commercial, and it's not exotic, it's just a different mix of bacteria than the bacteria that produces methane. So if you can create a steady stream of hydrogen out of your food waste, then we would use that to power buses rather than batteries, because the buses have a longer range if you use hydrogen. So that's the kind of thing we want to do. Those are the kind of things you're going to see in this report. And we expect the report and next steps to go forward in the coming probably month or two at the latest. And we've been working with a group from up there who are concerned about the incinerator, so they know what we're doing and what we're working on.
Well, that's a good question and a great answer. I'm gonna ask you just a couple of quick questions that are appearing in the chat. And people are interested in your thoughts about the Glenmont Shopping Center and White's Ferry and Lake Forest Mall. I know that some of those
Okay.
are City of Gaithersburg and some of them are county and planning.
This,
Do you have
this is
any-
all. I
Go
can
ahead.
do this. Okay. Glenmount Shopping Center. There is one property owner who's an obstacle. He refuses to sell his property. He does this routinely. He buys property in key locations and then makes it impossible to develop unless you give him what he wants. And he bought a piece of property in the middle of this, and it's a real problem. We have a developer who is very interested in developing the property. He is talking to this person, and we're hopeful that they can reach an agreement on a price that isn't ridiculous so they can actually redevelop the property. But that says, the county's trying to do something, even going back to when I was on the council. This is like, somebody said 40 years. I just know for the last 16, 17 years, there's been an effort to do something there, but the county can't do anything until that property owner is off the property, and then we can make a deal with the other owners. And the party who's interested in buying it believes, as far as I know, that they've got an agreement in principle with the other owners. So we think we could get it done, but we got to solve the one person who's a problem. White's Ferry. So people are in talks. They may have a solution. I know that the woman on the Virginia side and the guy who bought it, what is it? Not Kane, is it Kane? Who bought it on our side? They don't talk to each other. So the county's acting as an intermediary to try to get an agreement. I had proposals for an agreement that were unacceptable to the person on our side. It was real simple. It was like the county would put, a tax or a toll or a fee on the crossing. The fee would go to the person on the Virginia side. They would be happy, but the person on the Maryland side wasn't willing to add the fee to the price of the ferry. So that didn't go forward. And then there's just been going back and forth. We think we can get there. Our folks are optimistic that they're in the ballpark on an agreement. I'll know soon whether they're actually in the ballpark, but we're trying to close this out as soon as we can. And the former Lake Forest Mall could do a lot of things, but there's no way in the world this developer is going to build affordable housing and homeless housing in any quantity. It's a private developer. They have bought the property, the Gaithersburg Master Plan. You guys can see the Gaithersburg Master Plan online. They're negotiating over what they're going to do or how much of the plan they're going to do. I'm not quite sure because the county's not privy to any of these discussions. We've been trying to make sure that they relocate the planned BRT station to a location where it's actually useful, as opposed to the back of the property where it is right now. And we think we're in the ballpark on that. So that's where we're happy.
So the next question about property taxes and the assessments that have come out, we've got some reports about people unhappy about the large increases in their state property assessments. I wonder if
So
you have any.
the assessments are capped. So you will not see the tax on your assessment in 1 year. The assessments are only, I think in the county, they're only allowed to go up 10% a year. And so even if you got a 30% assessment, it would take 3 years to get to the full cap. Theoretically, the council could lower the amount that goes up from 10% to 5% or something like that. But right now, the cap is set at 10%. The new assessments are coming in higher in District 3, though we're not seeing an average that high. The average is closer to 20% in that district. That's probably the district that I was told has the lowest property values in the county, but it's certainly not going to go up at an exponential rate. And we'll see, we'll see how things play out with the state. I mean, depending what taxing authority we get. And, one of the things I've asked for is there's another tax bill which would raise the property tax rate cap from 3.2 to 3.5. If you raise it to 3.5, you have to lower some of the tax brackets as well. And so what I would like to do is to find a point where we raise it to 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 at different high income levels, and we either leave it the same or lower it on other income levels. So the break point right now for the state is they give us detailed information on everybody's income up to $500,000. We've asked them for breakdowns on $100,000 increments above $500,000, so we can get a calculation of how much of an increase at different levels on the top allows us to give how much of a decrease at different levels on the bottom. I think the state says we can't go any lower than either 2.5 or 2.25. I don't remember which of those two it is, but we're trying to come up with something in that frame that, in my dream scenario, we're able to shift some of this burden off of residents, to everybody, and have a more progressive tax system than everybody getting hammered with the same tax rate. And similarly, if we're able to do the special taxing districts, we would see what happens to our capital budget and then what it means in terms of revenues overall available to the county. If it opens the door to us doing things in a more progressive way there, we would happily do it. I'm still interested in letting homeowners who have limited income. I don't believe in blanket exemptions based on age or anything else. I think whatever you do ought to be based on income. But I'm interested in the system that will allow people to say your rate went up 3% and it has a $200 effect on your tax bill, to let people take the delta and put that into an account. Well, you wouldn't put the money there, but you would create a future drawdown. So then when you sell your house or your house transfers to somebody, that the delta would be due at that point. So that a senior with limited income could stay where they are and not worry about their rate going up. But when the house is sold, and anybody who's selling a house who's owned it for 35 years or 20 years, is going to see massive increases in their value. They could pay whatever they got a deferral on the taxes from out of the sale proceeds. So it wouldn't take a huge hit out of the sales proceeds. It would keep people in a level area. And we'll try to work something like that and send it over to the council if we've got state authority to do it. But I'm not averse to trying to fix that.
Yeah, I'd like you to address the question of public safety and the down county, particularly in Silver Spring. In a recent Safe Silver Spring meeting, some of our neighbors expressed some real concern about their safety. They mentioned carjackings, armed robberies at ATMs, and residential burglaries. I'm wondering, in your conversations with the chief and the local commanders, how you might respond to the people's perception that it's not safe and what we can do.
I mean, the good news, everybody doesn't feel that way. So that's the good news. We've taken a lot of steps. we've got cameras, stationary cameras now in downtown Silver Spring, under which large parts of Silver Spring are under observation. We have cameras in the garages, and there are going to be more cameras in the garages, not just in Silver Spring. We're working on a contract now to enhance the number of cameras. We had a discussion, and this is a prelude to, I think it has to be a community discussion. We can put more cameras on the street. It all depends what people's appetite is for cameras on the street. How much surveillance are people comfortable with, and how much surveillance is a bridge too far for people? We've got the license plate readers, which are helping us identify stolen cars coming in from the district when they cross the line. The new cameras on all of the police cars are going to have automatic license plate readers. So if the camera, crosses a license plate, it automatically will read it. It'll tell us if it's stolen, if there's outstanding warrants on the owner. It'll give us a lot of information so enhance police enforcement. The drone program, we've got drones in Silver Spring and Wheaton. I anticipate expanding the program. It's going to be successful. It's already showing merit. And so we would expand more drones around the county. So that would mean potential to put them in more shopping areas around the county. So, we've taken a pretty aggressive approach to this. Our biggest problem is our police department. We are, short a lot of officers right now. And if things go the way they're going, we're going to be a lot shorter. We'll see whether the bonus increases the incoming class of officers. Can we get growth in the class size? We're moving to allow former employees to come back. We have a policy in the county, if you're an employee, you can't be rehired by the county. We're going to change it so you can be rehired by the county. It would allow us to hire former police officers and put them in non-patrol jobs where they don't need to be, on the street. It would free up patrol officers or patrol eligible officers from, management or, I don't know what the right word for, clerical positions or office positions, or let us put them back out on the street. It would allow, people to go to work at the call center. We've had a real problem with the call center, and we would allow people to come back part-time. And so we could bring policemen on part-time to fill shift vacancies. Right now, I went out on a ride-along. Minimum staffing was 10. There were only 9 officers the night I went out. I don't think I counted as the 10th officer. We went out and we did a ride-along. It's just too few officers, and so we need to put more people on the street. So we're doubling down on our recruiting. We've hired a recruiting firm for the first time. So instead of us doing our own recruiting, we're using the company that did hiring for Fairfax County. We'll see if they can produce results similar to what they produced in Fairfax County. But we're kind of pulling out all stops to figure out both how to increase staffing down there, how to make use of the people we have better, and how to use technology in a more advanced way. So we will have a discussion, because before I, go about saying we're going to put a lot of cameras on the street, I want to make sure that people are comfortable with whatever we decide to do in terms of cameras. And you all would be more than welcome to give us input about how you feel about cameras and public safety.
I thank you for that answer. Eileen Finnegan has asked a question about David Bramble and GLDC. I think that's Viva White Oak. Is that Viva White? So we hadn't heard much about that recently. She's asking if it's going to take a additional large county investment, and is any of this going to be included in your CIP?
So right now he hasn't come up with a dollar ask. We're having a discussion about what they want, and we're having a discussion about how we tax for it. We had a very interesting discussion with him because, I made it clear. I said, look, the taxes I've got in place are there to provide infrastructure. If I don't get the infrastructure, you don't have a project. So we've got to figure out what's the least painful way to raise taxes there rather than the current system. And this is one of the big differences in what I want to do versus what the county does now. So bear with me while I explain this to you. Today, we've got impact taxes. So if you're a developer and you want to do a project, if it's residential, you're paying a transportation and the education impact tax. And if it's a commercial, you pay a transportation impact tax. You have to pay this tax at the beginning of the project. It is millions of dollars, which means you're either borrowing for it, you're financing for it, or you're bringing in somebody else as an equity investor to help you find the money. That means your project in Montgomery County costs more than the same project in Virginia, where they have no impact tax. Remember, Virginia's tax is a property tax that's on the end of the line, and the people who pay the property tax on a commercial property are actually the tenants in the building. They're paying the higher rents in Montgomery County because if the developer has a higher cost in financing their building, that's reflected in the rents. So at the end of the line, you're getting hit whether it's in a rent or whether it's in a property tax. But the developers can't build a competitive project here without having to borrow more money. He would like not to have to do the impact tax. He was interested in the discussion about a taxing district where the cost is spread out over 20 or 30 years to pay for the infrastructure that we are going to tax him to build. And so we've had a very positive discussion. We came up with a couple of different ways we could do that. We're going to put a work group together with his people and my people. But we're very focused on being sure that we're able to cover our infrastructure needs. We've already got $40 million in the budget for transportation. We never took the money out, so it's happily been sitting in the budget for, 10 years now? I forget how long this thing's been sitting there, but it's been sitting there for a very long time. So the money's there. If he's got a project, we use it. I did see his road plan. His road plan probably will cost less than what was originally planned for. And we're going to just work with them, which is kind of what we've done on the other projects. We've got ourselves involved and made sure that we got solutions that addressed what our transportation needs were, that were not overly onerous to the person trying to do the development. And then we supported them at Park and Planning so they didn't have to do some of the things Park and Planning wanted them to do.
Thank you very much for that answer. So this is a softball question I wanted to ask you. We weren't able to participate in your countywide budget public sessions, the community conversations that you had. I was wondering what was your takeaway from those meetings about what were people really interested in and what were their priorities?
So it's always hard to tell because there are interest groups that make sure somebody from an interest group is at every meeting. But libraries were certainly an issue. LGBTQ issues were an issue. Like we don't have a center for LGBTQ youth. So there are issues about our programming and can we have a center? There's a lot of interest in having more public meeting spaces in the county. I kind of explained like I don't have the option of building more buildings. So, we have to, continue to share spaces. We can work with the school system to try to come up with a more, or I should say less painful way of accessing, the CUP properties that are jointly, managed by the county and by the school system. On the East County, when they moved Burtonsville Elementary School to the new location, that school is going to be used for childcare, but it could also have some other uses, possibly adult daycare, but also meeting space for community groups in the evening. And I'm going to push that really hard because the East County's got a lot of very diverse minority and foreign population groups that want places where they can meet. This could afford us a relatively simple and cheap solution to being able to do that. People would like us, obviously, public safety came in. So we talked about, the issues of policing. Transportation came in, like as in, when are you ever going to do something? How long has this been in, BRT been in the books? We talked about what we plan on doing. And people were very interested in our tax slides. I didn't show you every tax slide we have, but we showed the tax slide about where Montgomery County compares on education, for example. And people don't realize that 12 years ago, Montgomery County had the highest per capita spending. We had the highest teacher salaries. So today we spend 3,000 less per student than we spent 12 years ago when you adjust for inflation. And our instead of being the highest spending per capita on schools, we're number 5. So when somebody asks why our schools are different or not like they used to be, the pretty simple answer is we used to invest. We don't invest right now. So when I was teaching, we had aides for longer part of the day. Over the years, saving money, and the school system has reduced the amount of aid time a teacher has. So you no longer have an aide for your day. If you have a class that's really diverse, like the ones I taught, I started with an aide for my entire day. I ended up whether I wanted an aide for 45 minutes of English or 45 minutes of math. Those are the kind of things that have happened to the school system out of this penchant for defunding them. We are going to hold the school system more accountable in the limited ways we can, because the state very much limits anything we do. But we're trying to find ways that we can force the issue, and we're going to be talking to the state about legislation. One of the things I would like is to make it so the schools cannot develop their budget until they have the county's revenue estimates, because they have already developed their budget and they don't have our revenue estimates. And when they go out and tell the public, a good example is their capital budget. Their capital budget is so overloaded this year that it's beyond belief. And they do this every year. The out years are either zero or next to zero. And they front load everything in the first 4 years. And then now we are 2 years later from the last big budget. They pushed all this stuff in the first 4 years, and their outer 2 years are so unrealistically low that we know when you get there 2 years from now, they're going to have big numbers in those holes. So there's no truth in budgeting right now. And we need to just have honest discussions. I wish I had more money. If I could change this tax policy, I would have more money, because some of the money we're putting into transportation, we could shift into school construction, and it would save you from, having to delay school modernizations or raise taxes. But something's got to give somewhere. And we're trying to figure out how to make this work.
Let me ask you
these
one
are-
question. Well, let me
yeah.
ask you one question before we go to Lloyd, and then we'll try to see if we can get a hold of the woman who was on the phone at 301-565-5926. What's your feeling about the General Assembly passing that new taxing authority for the local jurisdictions?
So all the county executives are asking for it. This is the first. I've been raising this issue for years down there, because, Montgomery County, we saw it firsthand. We looked at the tiny dribble of money we get from the state for the BRT projects, and it's a joke. Give me 17 million a year. It's nice, but it takes a long time to accumulate enough money to build anything. And because it's an appropriation, I can't bond on it, because I don't know whether I'm going to have 17 million every year to pay off a bond. With the change in the governor is just saying there's no money, everybody's in the same boat we're in now. And so there is MACA, which is the Organization of Counties. They're making this a legislative priority. This is something they've never done before. And most delegates understand if you don't decouple the tax rate, you could give us the authority and nobody's going to raise the tax rate. Because if it's not decoupled, people will kill us. So, and for the developers, they get a level. In first place, it doesn't cost the developer anything. Let me add that, because this tax is going to wind up on their tenants, not on them. So unlike the impact tax, which makes their project more expensive, this will not make their project more expensive. But what it will do if we build the infrastructure, because this is only based on building infrastructure, if we build it, your property gets more valuable. The more transportation we provide, the better access we provide. If I fix Observation Drive, if we do the metro entrances that people want. Those things will drive up the value of property and will make their rents higher. It'll also mean that the amount of money the county gets is going to go up. So there's a virtuous cycle. The developers did it in Virginia. And if they can go to the Republican, this was a Republican legislature and a Republican governor that gave the Northern Virginia counties the authority to tax this. And Alan, I should have had it today. I'll get Rich to send you and you can circulate it to your folks. There's a letter to the editor from the Republican governor, I think in 2012, Godwin or whatever his name was, who touts the solution as a boon to development in Northern Virginia, what it was going to mean to Northern Virginia. This is a Republican governor touting the taxing authority on the private sector in order to build infrastructure that frankly mostly benefits the private sector. You got to see it to believe it, but it's real. And so if they get into Virginia, I don't know why people can't get it here.
Thank you. Lloyd, you've got a question. Please unmute and ask your question. Lloyd, you're muted. There you go.
In the context of,
Press back.
No, we're going to get you next. We're not going to get you next. Go ahead, Lloyd.
in the context of an aging and decrepit shopping center that needs revitalization, yet there's an owner of one small part of that which is stopping progress. Why don't you exercise eminent domain over that?
Because you can't.
Well, maybe you ought to get, I don't want to be snippy. Why don't you get authority to do that?
Because so Supreme Court made a ruling.
It was called Kilo and it was in Connecticut and said you could do it.
You can't do it unless there's an economic reason for it. That is not the
I don't want to argue with you.
Lloyd,
if
Lloyd,
this was
please.
if this was an empty center, or if there was lots of empty buildings, we could go after it. If his property was sitting there rotting, we could go after it. It is very hard to make a case for a taking when everybody is making money on the property.
May I suggest to you that your authority is not so limited and you ought to have your county attorney read the Kilo or whatever it was case from Connecticut in the Supreme Court?
I will ask them again, but the fact that I would have moved on this ages ago.
Well, I'm on your side on this.
Okay,
So
Lloyd, thank you.
I will find out. Ask them, is it called Kilo?
I'll find out the name.
Okay. Give me, I'm sure they know what it is because it's a subject of discussion, but let me know what it is because I have no problems about exercising our right to do that. That would not bother me in the slightest.
Then this question sort of follows up. Well, let's see if we can get the woman who is on the phone at 301-565-5926. Our apologies. Do you hear us? And can you ask your question?
Yes.
Yes, it's Dale Barnhart. Yes, I'd like to, really two things. Number one, I'd like to know if council members' refusal to fund the Office of People's Counsel is in violation of the council members' own racial equality and social justice bill. This is really limiting a more, limited resource, people with limited resources on fighting some of their questioning some of the codes and the zoning changes.
So
what
it doesn't fall. It's not. There's no violation. All you do with racial equity analysis, all you do is an analysis. And I think they provided themselves an analysis that said actually that it would be used to benefit wealthy people who were fighting rezoning or something like that. I agree with you that it limits everybody. It limits, whether you have money but you don't have legal expertise, or if you don't have money and you don't have the financial wherewithal to bring on somebody. And middle-class households can't afford to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars from each household to bring on an attorney.
Exactly.
it's just, I think it's outrageous. That's why there's a state bill. We're supporting the state bill. You should contact your delegates about that bill. And I think Ben Kramer is putting it in and support the bill because, you know, the council should not be able to not fund this position because they're worried about whether it's going to impact what a developer gets to do.
No,
Well, what about the Office of Legislation Oversight? Can't they look into this as being in violation of their
It's
own racial equality, social justice bill?
It's not a violation. Their analysis was different. Who they say
Dale,
benefits from it is
Dale,
different.
let me ask the county executive this question.
Okay.
You probably remember the budget session in the spring before they passed the budget, where there was this back and forth between members of the Fed committee and Meredith Willington about the Office of the People's Counsel, when Council Member Jawando insisted that he was waiting for input from the county executive's office on new legislation or a new approach to the Office of the People's Counsel. He attributed the fact that the committee wouldn't consider the idea because he had an agreement, or they had an agreement with the county executive to have a meeting of the minds and come up with some new legislation. If you remember that, do you have a comment on that?
We didn't have a meeting of minds on what we were going to change. So I will go back and ask him what he thinks needs to be changed before we submit it over again this time.
Okay, Liz Joyce, and this will be the last
Oh,
question.
well, I just had another
Yes.
quick
Okay, Dale.
question about the blatant, please,
Go ahead,
about the
Dale.
blatant imbalance of the affordable housing within the county. 99% of the affordable housing it's in the east side of the county. There have been opportunities that have been passed up to build low-income housing on county property in Bethesda, but instead that property was turned over to high-end developers with a few few of the MPDUs, which is not low-income housing. And that is a lot, surface parking lot, county-owned surface parking lot 31A, and now again behind the farm market on Wisconsin Avenue, parking lot 24 and number 10 are going to be turned into a beautiful linear park. And instead, that county property could have been used to build low-income housing, such as what they're going to be doing on county property in Silver Spring, all over the place. So I'm very, very, the opportunity is lost, and we need more affordable housing. And I'm not talking about a token MPDUs. In Bethesda, where the jobs are and the better schools are and everything. So that's a concern to me. This blatant imbalance, I think, is also a violation of the Racial Equality and Social Justice Bill. And the Montgomery Housing Partnership does not have one project in Bethesda, not one. They're all in Silver Spring. And I just think this is a obvious violation.
Thank you, Dale.
So
Thank you.
we're doing as much affordable housing as we can get when we have to do private development. And the county is not a developer. And so we try to bring in partners to do this. In the case of the Big Lot, this is a deal that was in process and already in front of the planning board when I got there. And actually what it had done, it actually had shrunk the park that was supposed to be built there. And I was able to shrink the project and actually restore the park to what was in the master plan. But it wasn't ideal because I couldn't do much with the affordable housing. On the other lots, we've done 2 other lots in Bethesda, and we've gotten more affordable housing. One of the things that was of interest to me, and one of them, it was going to be condos, And the developer originally asked to be able to buy out of the condos, which was one of Nancy's last parting gifts before she left the council. Nancy Fleuring was to allow these buyouts. And so when I realized our folks had done 2 of them, just kind of routinely, I said no more. And they told the developer, we're not going to let you buy out. And they actually came back with what I wanted as a solution. They adjusted the sales price and the condo fees. So the combination of the two fit the MPDU requirement. And they adjusted what would be the pricing and condo fees on the market rate units to offset what they weren't going to get on the units they were providing us. And we got more affordability and deeper affordability than we would have gotten according to the law. We've done a lot of that with people in terms of pushing deeper levels of affordability. We've got a project going up in Pike and Rose. That is, when we do this development with Mr. Cohen, it's going to be a huge amount of affordable housing at a level we've never done before. We've got a 500 unit development that's going to go up near Emery Grove, not in a prime, not like a Bethesda area, but it's going to be substantial. And we're going to continue to drive different bargains. And when we introduce legislation that hopefully the council will pass to increase the range of affordability, we'll be able to talk about a much higher number, of units than we've been doing before. We do far too few units and far too few at prices that really affect people. Like I said, 50,000 people below $50,000 couldn't get an MPDU if they wanted to because their incomes are too low. Teachers. This was one of the reasons for the increase in the teacher pay last year. A teacher starting at $53,000 couldn't get an MPDU. So it's a problem. And we've got to figure out how we're able to do more of this. The county continues to market our lots. We've got a lot going on up on a vacant lot in White Flint. That lot, I think it's where the fire station is going to go. And that lot will have affordable housing on it next door to the fire station. We're working with HOC in Wheaton and building a really substantial development there with mixed housing in it. The county's acquired a piece of property through the trade with United Therapeutics that's going to let us build an apartment building on Fenton Street in downtown Silver Spring. And we're looking at proposals for some of the other parking lots in Silver Spring. And we're continuing to look at, what else we can develop in Bethesda where the county owns property. So our goal is to develop as much as we can. And to accomplish that, we've brought in more nonprofits doing business in Montgomery County than we've had before, because we wanted a wider range of people who might be more interested in more of the housing we're interested in. Like I said, the Falklands, instead of getting knocked down and turned into luxury housing, are going to be, affordable and moderate income housing for a lot of people. So we're trying to bend the curve on what we build so that it serves more people. If you want to be really upset, while the Park and Planning is recommending more affordable housing on the east side of the county, they approved an apartment building in Bethesda where the developer got a ton of, what are those things called? Airbnbs. So in the middle of the housing crisis, they've allowed one developer with an apartment to put in a ton of Airbnbs. They allowed another developer who was building an apartment to turn part of the apartment into a hotel. So apparently you don't have a housing crisis if a developer doesn't want to talk about it, but you got a housing crisis when you want to put affordable housing in neighborhoods that already have lots of affordable housing. So that is the nature of the beast.
Thank you for the question, Dale. Liz Joyce, you'll be
Thank
asking the
you.
last, you'll be asking
I
the
have a
last,
very,
the last
yeah.
question. Now, Dale, we're going to go to another question. Congratulations, County Executive, on the United Therapeutics project. That's a big one for Silver Spring. Liz Joyce, you'll be asking the last question.
Yeah, actually, I
Thank you.
wanted to,
The requirements for the sprinklers in these large
No,
buildings.
that who's
I
asking that question? I didn't call on you. So please respect our process and Liz Joyce.
yeah, I just wanted to thank Mark for clarifying the racial equity social justice law. What apparently it does is require that an analysis be done of every law in ZTA. But what you're saying is that there's no requirement for the council to abide by
No.
their recommendations.
No, they did a racial equity analysis for Thrive, and they said they shouldn't pass Thrive.
Right.
They just ignored it.
Right. In the 2008 OLO study that the council was using as an excuse for not funding the Office of the People's Council all these years, that was not negative toward the Office of the People's Council. It just said that there needed to be some clarifications of the legal language. And as Meredith pointed out to them, you are the legislature. It is your job to clarify the legislation. So it was a big shell game, and they were not straight about what they were actually doing, which was using using this excuse of this 2008 report to say that they were justified in not funding it.
Yeah.
And also Mr. Friedson had a bill to absolutely eliminate the Office of the People's Council from the code.
Yep.
So, and that hearing was really quite an interesting hearing. It was really very distressing to watch the misrepresentation of the facts.
Yep. I agree. I will say, so, yeah, I mean, I was on the council when we had a People's Council, and no one came to us. And certainly didn't come out of the executive branch, anything about re-examining the role of the People's Council. So I'm not quite sure what Will was expecting, but I can clarify, see if I can clarify, like I said before, I can see if I can clarify that. I will say that somebody asked me what grade I taught. I taught 4th and 5th grade. And Mr. Harney has a comment of an HSC and large project at Chevy Chase Lake. I actually, this is not a project I'm happy with. If you know anything about what HSC had lots of property in Chevy Chase Lakes. And they could have redeveloped their property, built a lot more of affordable housing, and had some market housing to mix in it. Instead, they chose to go in on this deal in which they get some affordable housing, but mostly the building's luxury housing. And if they had redeveloped their own property, they could have done more and gotten more. And this is under the previous leadership of HOC. This was kind of where the direction they were going in. You know, they kind of lost their guidance or purpose in terms of building a lot of affordable housing and kind of being minimalistic about what they did and making these deals, which really didn't accomplish what we needed to accomplish. Just to be blunt.
Mr. County Executive, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving us so much of your time. It's been quite an expansive presentation. We look forward to the introduction of your CIP and then your operating budget later in the spring. I think you and the Chief Administrative Officer have received our comments and our priorities, but for the most part, they're very consistent with what you're doing. So we want to thank you for everything you do for us, and we'll stay in touch and look forward to seeing you around the county.
If I, Alan, if I send you stuff, if I want, like I want to send you, I might send you DC's tax report so you all can look at it. And if I want to send you some of the other data sheets on Montgomery County comparative taxes, I'd like to share that because, I mean, to me, the most important thing we're trying to do is shift this tax structure. It is in the residents' favor to do this.
We're happy to share any materials that you want to share with our delegates and our guests, and we'll post it on social media. So thank you very much again, and look forward to seeing you around the county.
Okay, I will be there, no doubt.
I'll take the spotlight off of you now, so remove the spotlight. So there you go. Thank you so much. I want to thank the county executive for joining us for our January meeting. Before people fall off the call, we've got one other important piece of business we'd like to take care of. Some of you remember our conversation in December about a resolution that would talk about environmental issues and the importance that we give to removing invasive plants from county trees in the public right of way. We had a conversation about it. We rewrote that resolution and put it in the January newsletter. It's on page 9. And so we're asking for your approval now. I'm going to entertain a motion to not read the full resolution. Can I get a motion to not read the full resolution? Peggy,
Yes,
Peggy,
I move that we pass the resolution as printed in the newsletter.
that's a motion from its contributor. And is there a second? Jerry Garson, you're seconding that? Okay, so the question is on the resolution. It's the MCCF resolution urging county on trees, stumps, and invasive plants. You've had 2 months to consider it. So all those in favor of adopting the resolution, that's on page 9 of the Civic Federation newsletter, please indicate your approval by raising your hand.
Aye.
Anybody disapprove? Any Kira, we can't hear you if you've got a question.
Okay.
Kira, you just muted
You're
yourself
muted.
again.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kira.
Am I unmuting? Okay. I want to add something. I think we're missing out on one really important thing, which is that in our neighborhood, at least, there are so many trees being removed by developers, and they are paying pennies for doing that removal, and they're not replacing the trees. And also, when the trees are removed, the stump removal is a big issue. Why isn't stump removal part of tree removal? And why don't we require the county to have developers pay much more for tree removal? And then those funds could be used to do all the things that we want to do in what is in this resolution. I agree with everything that's in the resolution as far as aims go, but we're missing out on how is the funding going to be done.
Okay, that's a good, it's been first and second. It's a time for conversation. Harney?
I just wanted to point out that the county has banned all pesticides. So I'd love to know how we're going to remove all these invasive non-native plants.
I want to separate these two issues. So we're going to talk about the environment in April during the observation of Earth Day. So we can revisit pesticides and herbicides at that time. Kira's question issue about the cost. We know that Council President Friedson and Evan Glass, and I think unanimously adopted by the council, but I know that at least the two of them, Friedson and Glass, have introduced legislation that would increase the cost of replacing trees. And to the extent that your issue is about a fair price for replacing trees, I think we can accommodate that. We did mention stumps in here, and it's pretty much up to the to Park and Planning and to DOT to make the decisions about stump removal. But we've called on them to increase the stump removal. How they do that is something that I think is sort of far outside what this resolution seeks to do, which is to talk about planting more trees, getting rid of vines, and what is the other thing where plant trees, remove stumps, and and deal with the invasive vines along trees along the right of way. Peggy,
you're
you have any
saying-
comment? Wait a minute,
Yes,
Kara.
you're-
Peggy, do you have
you're
any comment?
saying-
This was her thought.
I
Am
want to
I
just, I
Wait,
just want to
Kara.
point
Kara,
out,
please.
you missed,
You muted yourself, Kira, so let me ask Peggy to comment while you unmute. Peggy, go ahead and say what you're going to say.
My understanding is for every tree that's removed, including those on private land that would be removed by a developer, the developer has to pay for the cost of 3 replacement trees, which by the county's reckoning is $750. I don't consider that pennies.
Well, I mean, there's legislation to increase the price to be the fair market price of a tree since that law we passed 10 years ago. Kira, you have to unmute, and if you have to unmute, Kira, can't hear you.
you must have muted me. Okay.
I did not
So-
mute you. I did not mute you.
Sorry, that was me.
You
Okay.
said it's not just that you wanted to have stump removal. You have wording in there that said you want the government to increase the budget for stump removal. And that's a whole nother step.
I don't see how that's different from what you're suggesting, which is increasing the price, increasing the amount that they pay in lieu of planting trees and direct that to stump removal. I mean, I think this sort of language covers that.
Okay, my point was that I want the onus of getting the money to be on the developers rather than on the government, which is not going to have the money to do this. And
Okay.
I'll butt out at that point. I just wanted to make that point. So
No, it's a good point, and we did not take that into consideration when we drafted this. But let's make this not the last word we have on this particular topic. We're going to pick up a bunch of environmental issues in a couple of months, and we can focus on the questions of pesticides, herbicides, and how to finance these things. We're going to be meeting tomorrow. Some of us are going to be meeting tomorrow with Director Conklin, the director of Department of Transportation, and some of the people on his staff, and that'll be a good foundation meeting for us to talk about some of these other things. So Kira, you'd be really helpful if you can contact us and send us more information, and in a perfect world, some useful language that we could put into a resolution, or that we can focus on later. But I hope for this evening we can pass this resolution and get that off of the table. So please do that for us, and for all of you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Alan, you asked me to comment on the fact that we felt constrained from voting in January because we hadn't had time to consult with our association. And we have some constraints on what we can vote on if we haven't had a chance to do that. We've worked out procedures for being able to do that. And one of those procedures is we have to be able to see this resolution a little more than a couple of days in advance. I know we took it up in December, but we didn't see this text. I think Liz Joyce can confirm that until the newsletter came out in the middle of last week. And while we have a long history of in our association of support for the environment, there's no question about that. We've done legions of things in that regard. But anytime, as this underscores Kira's point, anytime a resolution is going to have an impact on the budget, even if it's a potentially small one, as this one might well be, it puts it closer to the line of controversial where we need a bit more time to consult with it. Now, resolutions are never perfect, and we don't want the perfect to drive out the good. This is a good resolution, and if you're committed to taking up Kira's issue about how this is going to be funded later, that would be great. But I just want to point out that we need a bit more time sometimes with some of these resolutions, and anything that has a potentially significant impact or just an impact on the budget. We need as much time as possible to look at them.
I fully understand. Peggy Dennis?
Yes, in response, I'd say I think it's high time we went ahead and voted on this resolution. And if one delegate is constrained by the constraints of their own association, then so be it. That delegate should abstain from voting.
No, that is a procedural way to deal with this, Jeff. But I fully understand what you mean, and given our institutional bandwidth, to write these things and present them and get them in front of the membership, it's very problematic. From all of you who are still here, we're down from the 56 people we had before down to 32. We could use a lot more help with our committee structures. If we had more people participating, then it would take a lot of pressure off of the executive committee. We don't have a lot of delegates who are participating regularly. So it's actually put a lot of pressure on me to write these things and get them into the newsletter in the time that we have. So I understand that, Jeff, and we could use a lot more help from Parkwood and the other associations. So we'll call a vote on this, and if Parkwood has to abstain, we respect that. So it's been first and seconded. We've had discussion on this issue. All of those people in favor of passing the resolution as passed, as printed on page 9 of the Civic Federation News, please raise your hand and say yes. Anybody
Yes.
opposed?
Yes.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention, and I'm looking for you, Jeff. Are you abstaining?
No, I voted in favor.
Thank you. So the resolution passed, and thank you all very much for your support of that. And please help us, with sending information to the newsletter, drafting letters that you'd like to support. Will be more effective if more people participate.
Alan, we're just as a comment, with anything like this, we're happy to contribute what we can, as long as we know it's being considered in advance. We will work with you to provide any background information if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. As some of you know, I mentioned this at the last meeting. I'm putting together a special housing committee for the Civic Federation to try to reach some sort of consensus agreement on how we deal with the panoply of housing issues, preservation of existing affordable housing, the MPDUs, the co-location of affordable housing on public properties, and zoning issues. I think we've identified 7 people who would like to participate in that, and we're going to get that work underway. Our next meeting in February is supposed to be on housing issues, and we're going to work through that and try to get a couple of speakers who can give us some guideposts of things that we need to take into consideration. So that's a heavy lift for us. Lots of people are concerned about affordable housing issues and the related zoning issues. So we can use everybody putting their shoulder to the wheel and helping us do that. So stay tuned for that. We haven't made more progress with it because I haven't moved that forward as efficiently as I would like. We're coming close to the end of our 2.5-hour period. Does anybody want to share anything from their neighborhoods with the rest of the group? This is the time we usually talk about our committees, which are very poorly staffed, and some of them are just not working at all. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 committees on education, environment, legislation, planning and land use, public safety, and public finance. I could say things about all of them, but I will not, does anybody have anything they'd like to say about education, environment, legislation, planning and land use, public safety, and public finance?
I'd like to say something.
Go
Can I
ahead.
speak?
Sure.
I'd like to say something about the bus lanes, the bus bike lanes that are happening.
Thank you.
There's one on University Boulevard now that just opened, and the problem that I see in my community is that, and you can see it maybe from the question I tried to ask Mark, whether the buses have been revised, the bus schedule, the routing has been looked at again and revised, because the only places where you see increased ridership around the country is when they've done that in those counties. Otherwise, the ridership continues to go down. And so I wonder if the county has done that. And the problem is that in our neighborhood, there's so few people percentage-wise that use buses rather than drive cars, that when they shut down, a third of the lanes to create a bus bike lane, there's a resentment from the community that the traffic is moving slower. And I'm afraid it's counterproductive in terms of getting people to want to fight climate change and join together to do that. So that's just something I want to bring up from my community, that we've done so little, I think, to stop climate change, but it's important that when we do it, it makes a lot of sense, and so that we don't create resentment against those goals. That's my 2 cents.
No, and there's been a bit of outrage from your community about sort of the lack of signage and the lack of sort of public notice. So we understand that. Encourage you to write to the Department of Transportation, or I guess that's the state of Maryland, right, on the university.
Well, no, it's actually the county that's doing this now, but
you're talking about the stretch between Amherst and Dennis.
Yeah, I guess it's Amherst and Dennis. But the University Boulevard is a state road, and the previous project was a state project, but this is now a county project. I guess they have a waiver from the state for the county to implement this. But I'm talking really about a deeper problem, not just, and that is a problem. The community meetings are not really meetings; they're really video shows, where you're lucky if you can get a question in. They're not good formats for public meetings, but there's a deeper question about the planning that's done beforehand, about the efficacy of these changes to stop the global, climate change, etc.
No, I understand 100%, and there needs to be a lot more community engagement about things that are so impactful, and there needs to be more public notice. So no, I get that, and please keep us on our toes about that. Liz Joyce, I see you have your hand raised. You have a question or a comment?
Yes, public engagement. There's a constant back and forth between advocates and the county and the planning board about the nature of public engagement, of true, the kind of reaching out to people that generates the kind of information that has any merit. And what happens is, particularly with Thrive, that they have all these data on what they supposedly did, but they put, most of it was one way. Most of it was like signs and postcards and putting information out at community events, not sitting down with people and asking them, what will such and such a change mean to you? And then recording who the people were, what their demographics were, where they lived, and so on. And so not only is the nature of the public engagement very weak, it's not valid, but it's being misrepresented, because it's really doesn't have much validity. There are standards that the federal government has, for example, for doing surveys. And if you ask the planning board and the council if these standards were met, you might find out that the answer is no. And of course, for the next land use issue is going to be the bill to not require parking in new buildings within a half a mile of metro. And that sounds good, and there's a great deal of national literature on this measure to reduce, reduce the amount of driving and so on. However, the background on this is that very often, and the argument is also that it saves money and that they could be put into units. But what often happens, as in Minneapolis, is that they eliminated the parking requirements and the developers pocketed the money, didn't build any more units, and of course didn't have to build the parking. So this is the kind of thing. In other words, if a reform is passed, can't there be any teeth in the law to require developers and builders to do what the goal of the bill is? And if otherwise, you're just giving them, carte blanche to do whatever they want.
So there wasn't a question there. That was a statement. We appreciate it. And you can help us crystallize our thoughts about that. I want to apologize to Debbie Rubin if she's still on the call about not specifically addressing the question of fire suppression sprinklers in apartment buildings and condos. It wasn't my intention to ignore that question. Just sort of hard to manage this, the many questions we had on a bunch of different subjects. Anybody else have anything that they want to say as we get close to the 10 o'clock hour?
I do.
Go ahead, Kim.
I want to talk about this pedestrian bicycle safety. Ira was very kind. I'm just going to point blank say it. I live in Wheaton, and the majority of the people here are not riding their bikes. The majority of the people are taking the bus here. We have a large immigrant population, and we don't have basic pedestrian safety measures that allow people in this community all the way up to Aspen Hill to cross the street safely. And the planning has already stated that they don't have the money. There's not money in the budget to facilitate bicycle lanes and pedestrian safety. So something has to give. And I believe priority should be given to pedestrian safety, not this elitist bicycle lanes that no one's using. And until everyone is able to cross the street safely, bicycle lanes should be last. So I'm not understanding how it became pedestrian and bicycle safety.
Thank you, Kim. I want to add that the University Boulevard is also extremely narrow to walk on the sidewalk. Very dangerous. 2 people have been killed on there in the last 20 years. And they need a safe and reasonable sidewalk for people to walk right next to that bike lane. But thank you, Kim.
No, I agree. I mean, if you care about accessibility, you can't put a wheelchair or rollator on some of those sidewalks, and we've advocated for changing that. We did list, I guess this is part of your point, Kim. We did advocate for pedestrian and bicycle safety in our priorities, and making a general.
How can it be a priority? How can bicycle be a priority when you can't cross the street safely?
Well, our point was
that priority.
Our point was on bicyclist safety, and it wasn't about bicycle lanes. To the extent that those two things are related.
Ellen, we have thousands of people walking and 10 people riding their bicycles, and most of the time they're on the other side of town. Okay. We have University Boulevard is unprotected, sharing with a bus.
Kim, we're happy to.
I put this in writing, and here we are discussing it now.
Yeah, I don't think that
when the Civic Federation is taking things into consideration, they got to take the whole county's feelings and how we live our lives, not just one section of the county.
I'm sorry you didn't like the budget priorities I drafted. Please,
And I explained that to you in writing.
I was gonna say, please help me be better. We want to know who MJ is, so we can make sure you're on the email list. So MJ, if you want
I've taken care of that. He sent it to me and I got it to Joyce in 2 different ways. He's
okay,
covered.
okay, that's good. Anybody else want to raise an issue?
Yeah, the county executive has a lot of committees that are under subscribed. I forgot what these committees are called. The
Boards and
you know, the
commissions.
citizens. Yes, exactly. There's a lot of openings. It's an underutilized resource.
That's true, and they've worked really hard to try to fill them, and with not a lot of success. Council member Leventhal, when he was a member of the council, wanted to get rid of the ones that were undersubscribed, and they've kept most of them. So we encourage, and we may do more putting in the newsletter. We can put in notices about these various committees that need members. I hope that people who are getting these newsletters are sharing them with their neighbors and their associations. That would be really helpful to get this information, the useful information that we put in the newsletter, out into our neighborhood. So please think about that, and please feel free to send in any information about the things that you're doing in your civic associations, homeowners associations, and your neighborhoods. We're still hoping to have a social event, in-person event, while we continue to meet virtually for these general meetings. And we were talking about having some sort of special productions that would be online, that would be on subjects of general interest that people could refer back to later. So this meeting is coming to a close at 10 o'clock. Who is speaking? Oh, Pat?
Yeah, it's Pat. Yeah, I just want to thank you. I just want to mention that the demonstration we had for fire prevention and preparedness in our community in December was excellent. And if anybody would like to have Jim Resnick come, he is a retired fireman who has, he does duty now on fire preparedness and prevention. And you can schedule him to come to your civic association meetings and talk to people about their homes, and he'll even come, you can schedule a private meeting at your home. This is all free. And it's so very, very useful. People were very glad that we had it, especially seniors, because you want to stay as safe as possible. It only takes a minute and 20 seconds for a room to catch on fire. And especially if there's a senior there that's living there and involved, it can happen so easily. So I'd be glad to send the information to anyone who's interested.
And maybe we'll get him or them to do a special presentation that we can videotape and then share with our members. So thank you very much for Pat. I'm glad that program was successful. Thank you for sharing with that. If there are no other questions, entertain a motion to adjourn. Don't speak all at once. Motion to adjourn. It's been moved. Is there a second? All those in favor? Thank you, everybody. The meeting is adjourned.
Right.
Thank you,
Night, everybody.
Alan.
Happy New Year.
Take care.
Thank you.